Hey, it's your real estate geek, Andrew Finney here. So today we're chatting about buyer closing costs. This is crucially important when you get ready to buy your new home, is to understand exactly how much it's going to cost you to get into that new dream home of yours. Now we're putting out videos 5 days a week, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel and keep up on everything. On Mondays we're talking about general real estate tips. On Tuesdays we're talking about home buying tips. On Wednesdays we're taking a look at what is something, just like today's Wednesday video where we're talking about what are buyer closing costs. On Thursdays we go over home selling tips, and on Fridays we go over home ownership tips. So if you like this information and you like this video stuff, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up now. Now let's go ahead and kick into what are buyer closing costs. So generally what you want to look at is it's going to depend on where you are in the country to determine how much your buyer closing costs are going to be. There's estimates as a rule of thumb between 2% and 4% of a sales price value. So a sales price value, let's say that you're looking at a $500,000 home. If we calculate out 2% to 4% of $500,000, that means that you're going to have anywhere between $10,000 to $20,000 in buyer closing costs. So what are they, right? What are buyer closing costs? Why does it cost so much? And exactly what does it do? Well, the buyer closing costs are on top of the down payment. So if your down payment on that same $500,000 home is 10%, that's $50,000 that gets applied to the principal balance of your loan. So instead of having a $500,000 loan, you're gonna have a $450,000 loan. Buyer closing costs are on top of that. You don't get that money back. That's the cost to actually close on your loan. It's like whenever you go and buy a vehicle, you're going to have closing cost on that vehicle. You're going to have the closing cost on that. If you go into a store and you buy some other product like an iPhone or one of those flagship big smartphones, Samsung, Galaxies, what have you, you're going to have some kind of closing cost in there. If you really start looking at that receipt, there's going to be all these little different fees in there for buying that that phone, especially if it was financed, as opposed to just paying cash outright for it. The same thing happens with any type of loan that you get. You're always going to have a buyer closing cost. What's really interesting is a lot of the buyers that I meet with, they don't know about buyer closing costs, and that's why I really thought it was great to make this video and let you know as a rule of thumb that you can plan on between 2% and 4% in buyer closing costs. Normally I just tell people to average that out at 3% and plan on that. It's really going to depend whether you're buying discount points. That's going to be a biggie. If you're in an attorney state, go ahead and check with your local real estate consultant to see if you're in a non-attorney state or an attorney state, which means you may or may not have to have an attorney involved, which is an additional buyer closing cost at that time. So can you roll those buyer closing costs into your home loan? Yes and no, and maybe so. What does that mean? That's like an answer to a non-answer and a non-answer to an answer, right? Yes, you can, depending on what your debt to income ratios are and depending on how your loan is structured. You want to get with your local loan officer to find out if that's something that you're able to do and if it makes sense to do. Sometimes they have to increase the rate to be able to cover it, and sometimes they can't cover it depending on what your debt to income ratios are if they're too high. It is also going to depend on what your FICO score is. So get your scores up and get the best, not only get the best interest rate, but also get the best kind of terms on your new mortgage loan as well. So there's other things that you might want to take into consideration. If discount points are really worth it, you need to talk to that local loan officer and see if buying points are really going to be that big of a deal to you at the end of the day. We're talking about a 30-year mortgage, and most people buy a home across the United States and they move anywhere between 5 and 10 years after buying that home. So most people aren't carrying a 30-year mortgage to term. So then ask yourself, if that's your plan, is to buy a home, live in it for 10 years, sell it, move into a different home, then ask yourself and plan that out up front. Because if that's the case, then why would you buy discount points unless you just want to spend extra money on that? So, I mean, some people are going to love it, some people aren't going to love it. It's up to you and your individual circumstances. So your buyer closing costs, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you 2 links. One link that I'm going to give you is to Zillow's closing costs, and the reason that I'm going to do that is they've itemized a whole bunch of different type of closing costs that you could expect to perhaps pay. And the reason that I say perhaps pay is because it really depends on where you are in the country with that attorney stuff, with if you're going to need flood determinators, and if you're going to need different type of policies that aren't typical in other parts of the country and vice versa. To get more information about that, check with your local real estate consultant and make sure that you're checking that real estate consultant's reviews and in, you're checking their ratings, and make sure you're getting the right agent for you to help you out. If you need help finding an agent, just let me know. I have a nationwide network that I'm happy to put to use for you. Now, the second link I'm going to give you is to a website called The Balance, and they're going to be reviewing the buyer closing cost on theirs as well, as far as recurring buyer closing cost and non-recurring buyer closing costs. So an example of a recurring buyer closing cost is actually when you have to plan for your property taxes, your homeowner's insurance, fees like that are going to keep coming back again and again and again. If you have a monthly insurance premium, those are going to be examples of recurring buyer closing costs. An example of a non-recurring buyer closing cost is like a title policy that you're going to pay one time to close on your home, or a lender fee that you're going to pay one time to close on your home. So you're going to have those type of non-recurring as well. And the best way to really try to get this information out is to sit down with your local real estate consultant so that you can go over it. Now, if you want me to make a much more detailed video about just itemizing out and giving you an estimated fee, nationwide estimate of what those fees look like, let me know in the comment section below. I'm happy to do it. It's just going to be a much longer video. Today's video is making you aware of buyer closing costs, giving you a really quick takeaway that you can use right now, which is a plan on 3% of the sales price. So going back to that $500,000 example, plan on about $15,000 towards buyer closing costs if you're not buying points and such. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. I'm always available to you. And just like we said at the front of the side of the video, if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up, subscribe now, and by all means, share it around. This is really, really important for anyone looking to buy a home to understand what buyer closing costs are. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy a great day.